We are now looking at the Dow down by about 535 points. Kevin, we've been doing this, the same rinse repeat cycle for weeks now during the war, watching the price of oil and then moving in the opposite direction for equities. Yes. We thought maybe yesterday we were through some of that, but that does not look to be the case this morning.
Yeah, certainly. The same market refrain continues, Becky, as when the prospects for a resolution in Iran go up, oil prices go down and stock prices go up. On the other hand, when the prospects for a resolution in Iran go down or get extended, as we saw last night, oil prices shoot back up, yields go up, and stock prices go down. So I think these short-term bouts of volatility are going to continue for the foreseeable future. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the resolution does materialize within 2 to 3 weeks. Then at that point in time, investors will start to shift back to all the underlying themes that were resonating in the market. And I think those themes can be found if you just follow where all the money was spent last year, is being spent this year, and will likely be spent for the balance of this decade.
You know, Kevin, the concern with that, though, is AI. The AI trade was not doing all that well ahead of this. We knew that the money was going to be spent, but all of a sudden Wall Street was looking at it a little differently, concerned about the cost, the capex of all of that, what that would mean, whether there was profit on the other side of that. What's your take on where we should be thinking about AI at this point?
And it's a legitimate concern, Becky, but I think focus less on who's spending the money and focus more on where the money is being spent. I've contended for a long time right now, if I could just use a baseball analogy in terms of what inning we're in the AI revolution, we're still in batting practice, and there's a double header of games ahead. Batting practice involves all the AI infrastructure spend, and the games, when they ultimately take place, will involve the transformation of the economy and society using all these intensive AI algorithms. But we're not going to see return on investment for years to come. So focus on where the money's being spent right now, and that's on AI infrastructure.
I hear you, and we've heard similar things. We had the CEO from Valley Bank who, makes loans to all of these subcontractors and contractors who are building out the AI infrastructure. His loan book was up 30 to 40%. So I hear you, follow the money. But if sentiment on Wall Street changes more permanently and the idea of capex is frowned upon by investors, you are not going to continue to see the big hyperscalers spend quite as much money. At least I wouldn't anticipate you would, unless Wall Street tends to look on it a little more kindly. Or am I wrong on that assumption?
Yeah, I don't think the hyperscalers scale back that much in terms of their spending plans, at least not for 2026. And I think a company like Eaton Corporation, for example, the big industrials conglomerate that actually just recently purchased Boyd Thermal to buy their cooling solutions to tie into their data center construction business. Even if the AI revolution goes away, Eaton Corporation still stays in business, but they're benefiting from the AI revolution. A lot of people are concerned with Micron Technologies right now. As far as I'm concerned, the AI revolution comes to a screeching halt without power and without memory. When I think of memory, I think of Micron. When I think of power, I look to the utility companies. And utility companies provide a good ballast during these periods of volatility. They typically pay good dividends, and they've also become a backdoor play into the AI revolution. So I think that's a smoother way to play the AI revolution going forward, Becky.
Kevin, where do you look at the higher oil prices and what that might mean, either from an inflationary perspective or what it might mean from a growth perspective, if it slows down the consumer, if it slows down other businesses related to the consumer?
Yeah, I look at the most recent GDP Now forecast for Q1. It was just lowered to 1.9%. A large part of that is due, obviously, to high oil prices, which limits the ability of the consumers to spend. Remember, of course, 70% of our economic growth comes from consumer spending. So the longer oil prices stay higher, the less consumers will have to spend, and the more the economy will slow, which puts the Fed in a very tricky place, right? Because oil prices have inflationary pressures, which would mean they may want to actually raise interest rates. They shouldn't, but they may. And the economy may slow as a result of that, which means they may want to be more accommodative. So I think in all likelihood, the Fed stays where they are. Of course, we'll see if things change when Kevin Warsh becomes the new chair. But for the foreseeable future, I don't think the Fed doesn't do anything. And we're going to have to wait for a resolution in the conflict to actually see some respite with respect to oil prices and inflation.
we must start with President Trump's address last night to the nation about the war with Iran. He said the military has accomplished a lot in the past month of the conflict, but there will be a few more weeks of fighting ahead.
I've made clear from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
For more on how the president's address last night and how it's impacting the markets, I welcome in Kevin Hanks, live from the CBOE, our pre-bell playbook. I mean, there was so much within this, of course, talking about, being ready to hit them extremely hard in the Stone Ages and put them in the Stone Ages in the meantime, really trying to wrap it up in 2 to 3 weeks. But oil really moved higher. Stocks are selling off.
Good morning, Nicole. Yeah, I watched every word of last night's speech and the ensuing reaction from futures and stocks and crude oil. And like most people, I left frustrated at what I heard. But then I thought about it. Remember, the Trump administration believes in pressure, right? They're putting their pressure. And I realized, because I thought the message was missing his point until I realized something, Nicole. Who was he speaking to? I don't think he was speaking to the American people. I think he was speaking to Iran, putting more pressure on them to settle. I think he was speaking to NATO for them to get involved in the Strait of Hormuz. I think he's putting pressure on all these groups to get involved or move in terms of the negotiations. Now, it's going to cause some volatility, but you have to be real careful. And the mainstream media and the financial news media is pouncing on this press conference from last night or this speech from last night and the negative tone. But if you think about it, who he was speaking to, maybe it makes more sense. Now, what should happen if this is true? You should see a flurry flooding the zone with positive headlines. And when that starts, I think that could be a trading event. So you have to be real careful here with where crude oil is, with where the overall futures are down in the VIX. I think this is going to be a real interesting day, Nicole, that is frankly just getting started and not over yet.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the U.S. can step out at any time. They are saying that they are happy to support their allies and what's going on. But at the same time, the allies need to step up and go take the Strait of Hormuz. Go get it. I mean, you need to cherish it. It's where you get your oil. We don't necessarily need our oil through there. Go get it. And so, look, the U.S. will stick around, but they certainly want to see some coordination from some of the allies as well. In the meantime, I mean, we're going to have a great conversation on investing in this market that is commodities driven. But it's not every day that I see West Texas more than Brent crude. I don't even know if that's right, what I'm looking at. But I do see West Texas here now at 112. That's creeping up to that 119 high we saw 2 Mondays ago. Was it 2 Mondays?
Well, a lot of the reports today when talking about crude oil is the fact that the two contracts are strangely close. Be careful, because remember, one is a May contract and the other is a June contract. So that could, the fact that there's only 19 days left in that May contract in light sweet crude, that could be injecting more volatility into that. So that is certainly something that's happening, but it may have to do with the fact that one is a May contract, one is a June contract, Nicole.
Yeah, you make such a good point, because yesterday I was talking about the Brent crude contract rolling over. So, yeah, so that is where it is right now, 109. But the point is it is up 8%, and that is notable. So I'm glad we have the live Brent crude chart there. And you make a good point about the contracts, because I did note that yesterday that we saw the rollover of the Brent crude contract. So we'll watch for all of that. And March 9th was when we hit the 119 level on West Texas. In the meantime,
Nate, what a week. Obviously, we've snapped this rally. We couldn't hold 6,600 yesterday. We fell through 6,500 this morning, although bounced off the lows now. But what is your technical sort of charts and analysis telling you right now?
Yeah, good morning, Sam. So we know that we're below the 200-day simple moving average on the S&P, Dow, and the NASDAQ as well. The two holdouts have been the Russell 2000 and the S&P equal weight. And they are above, I believe, or right around their 200-day simple moving average. But, Sam, I think you have to go to Monday's low. That's kind of the line in the sand. And then if you want to get very nuanced, I'm a trader, and just to the audience out there, the demographic that I serve is our options traders, our more active traders. So I'm not in money management. I'm more of like a options educator, and I put out content that's market timely. When I look at the nuanced price action here, it's basically been, I think the correlation with, the S&P 500 and oil is like minus 0.82. So it's almost a perfect, or close to a very high correlation, inverse correlation. And then you look at the price action today. Well, WTI, it's up 10%. It looks like we might get to, another closing high. We hit 120 a couple weeks ago. But the price action is relatively benign, meaning we're off the lows. We're not making new lows throughout the session. We're actually near the highs of the session right now with WTI around 110, which I think is something to pay attention to. And then the other consideration I look at is where did the money go when we had this 2-day sharp bounce over the this week? And they went to basically gold was a relative outperformer. They went back to treasuries and then also the AI infrastructure plays and mega cap tech. That's where the money flow appears to be going, looking for relative safety.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was even talking to Katie Stockton yesterday with obviously her technical analysis. It looked like we were seeing a bit of short covering in recent days, and in fact a bit of a chase rather than positioning in this market, which tells you something as well about just how much stock we were putting in that rally. But obviously, again, we could call this Friday, couldn't we? Because we're going into a long weekend when the markets are going to be shut, de-risking once again going into the weekend. Then if you are tracking some of this options activity, then Nate, what is it telling you about, what we could be in for as far as vol heading into Easter?
Right. So on the options side of the equation, a lot of the hedging has really already been done. And that's institutions primarily go to the SPX, the S&P 500 index, and that's where they're looking to establish their hedges. They'll go to the VIX as well. VIX options volume this week, and even leading up to that, it's been coming down. It was like 3x, 4x that I was seeing maybe a couple weeks ago. So that just tells me that a lot of the hedging has been put in place. Look at the VIX today. It's only around 26.5, 27. But what happens when you get into these elevated type of environments is that if you're an options trader, you're going to need to basically sell some vol. So what does that mean? If you want to buy a protective put, sell a call. You could also buy a protective put and then sell a lower strike put to do that as well. You could also do a put front spread. I'm going to buy a put, sell 2 lower strike puts. But that's kind of the environment. But Sam, it's not like when you get these types of elevated VIX environments that option volume goes up, heavily, and it's because options are so expensive. And so you really have to be a nimble trader. You have to be experienced. You have headline risk. And to your point about heading into this weekend, not only do we have the non-farm, monthly jobs report that's coming out, but President Trump had said April 6th was the deadline that he was going to extend. Is he going to attack the energy infrastructure? And if so, what is going to be the response from the Iranians, basically, if that does occur? So there's a lot of, heightened uncertainty, I would say, heading into this 3-day weekend. And yet we're basically at the highs of the session. So I'd say the price action today, at least, is relatively benign.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, you're right about April 6th. There's just been so many headlines since then. It's really hard to keep track right now. And herein lies some of the confusion and just how sensitive the market is. Anything else stand out to you? I mean, obviously we've got chips on the back foot today as well. I mean, technology is getting hit pretty hard, it seems, the softwares as well. I mean, after catching a bit of a bid, I know that things had been getting a little bit sort of technically ugly, you could say, for some of the Mag 7 cohort as well earlier this week. Anything that sort of stands out to you here on the charts?
Well, the other big question, I think, and it's not just on my mind, is have we really hit that level of, capitulation? And what is capitulation? Well, capitulation typically is characterized by a big spike in the VIX. You usually get some kind of a V rebound. You might get some kind of price action where there's really bad news, we gap down, but yet then we close at the highs of the session. So you're looking for some, anomalies, basically a really sharp sell-off, really extremes, sell everything, correlation to 1, get me out of here. I don't want anything to do with it. I've given up, so to speak. And then has that moment been reached? Because right now, even though we've rallied over the past couple of days, we're still in a downtrend, and you're just making lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. Yeah. We're still in that downtrend. And so what you want to do is establish that confidence within the market psychology. And so we need something to trade against. And if you're in a downtrend, it's difficult to get money flow back into the market. But if you have something of a V to basically put a line in the sand, then that would be more encouraging. So that's still a question mark out to the markets. Have we hit that capitulation point?
And Stephen, I explain this because I was reading your work, this big thesis on why the evolution of communication finally has to leave copper behind and focus on photonics.
That's right. A few years ago in data centers, we started moving information faster than it could be moved on copper. Copper goes all the way back to the telegraph in terms of moving information around. And finally, with AI, we ran out of bandwidth on copper. So for a few years now, the big hyperscalers in these big data centers, they've been relying on light. Photonics is basically turning information from electricity, bits moving around, into light pulses, and then reassembling it on the other side. So the key now is that with copper off the table, something that's been around for 40 years, what was called fiber optics and is now called photonics, it moves to the front. It was always cost prohibitive because it's finicky compared to copper, and copper, it's easy to install. So I think that there were always reasons price-wise we chose copper over light, but photonics really is the only way for AI now.
So Jensen Huang obviously agrees with you. He's spreading bets around light, coherent. Yesterday, Marvell, and these names respond. Just your thoughts. Do you like these bets? Do you think these are smart moves that Jensen's pulling here?
I think he's doing it for two reasons. One, obviously, they want to preserve their supply chain. And companies like Lumentum and Coherent, they're making the parts that make light work in these giant data centers. But the other thing that NVIDIA is doing that I think is really smart is they're looking at anything that could slow the growth of those AI factories. NVIDIA has to see those AI factories growing on pace in order to hit that $1 trillion in sales he was talking about in GTC. So they're looking around at any of the segments around them that might be undercapitalized and putting some serious money into them so that you don't have a big data center sitting there waiting on a tiny part that doesn't show up. And that idle capital is something that neither NVIDIA or its customers can handle.
So later tonight, speaking of data centers, we've got this launch of the Artemis II. I'm pumped as pumped can be. Slingshot around the moon. It's just another really, another exclamation point on the fact that the space economy is here. And with that, you also say that photonics is the only answer when it comes to data centers in orbit. Explain that.
Well, I'm 20 miles from the pad, so I'll be standing it out in my backyard watching it in a few hours. Absolutely. But I think the key to remember is that photonics is lighter, weight-wise, than copper, about 10 times lighter. So since everything we want to put in space, we have to lift off the Earth on a rocket like that one, we have to make sure that it's as light as possible. Right. The other key is you can send a virtually unlimited amount of data through photonics versus copper. So the other key is no heat. With photonics, you don't generate any heat. With copper, you get a lot of heat. So for data centers in space, really light is the only way forward.